What's a common misconception about relationships that you wish people would stop believing? Write in the comments what you think about this. What are people misguided about? Enjoy the show. Story 1. I've noticed that a lot of people seem to have this idea that, it's weird to want to spend time with your partner. Now, sure, some people just like a lot of space. They don't really want to be around anyone for more than a couple hours. But if you want to see your best friend all day, every day, but get annoyed if you spend more than an hour or two with your husband and start calling him clingy, that's a problem. Story 2. The misconception I personally had to deal with was my partner making me everything. They couldn't enjoy the things they enjoyed without my presence. They couldn't go out and have fun with their friends because they wanted me to be there too. It became very depressing because I wanted nothing more than for her to enjoy everything she already enjoyed on her own and just have me be an extra addition. Sometimes we'll do things together. Sometimes we won't. The other misconception I dealt with was them not being able to understand that we can disagree on a course of action, but we can still find a compromise that works for us both. It's not all or nothing in a partnership, but they just kept on trying to get it all while blaming me for asking a simple question of, hey, where do my wants fit in? You don't need to win or lose in these choices, but for some reason that was the biggest hurdle I could not make them understand. Story 3. No match is perfect and all couples fight and it takes a lot of work almost ruined my life. These platitudes convinced me that the incompatibility with my first boyfriend was totally normal and fine. I almost married him. Thank the Lord above I didn't make that mistake. And eventually, I did find my person who was almost perfectly compatible with me. Sure, I bet I could get along with some people well enough to make it, but life would be a lot harder than it was just waiting to find the person I truly clicked with. So, if you are fighting like 5/7 days a week and find yourself crying all the time, that is not a healthy relationship. There is a limit to how much work it should take to get along. Story 4. That working at a relationship or fighting for it is always a good thing. Making some reasonable accommodations to fit a partner's personal preferences on some things is great, healthy, and mature. But if you find yourself doing that too often, at some point, it turns into trying to force something that just isn't working. Some people are just incompatible. It doesn't necessarily mean that either one of them is a bad person. It's entirely possible for two great people to be a very bad match for each other. That's important to remember because it's very easy to fall into a pattern of over-reliance on scripts. Like thinking, this is the way good relationships are supposed to work. When in reality, what you're thinking is more like, this is what I, as one person, want in my relationship. You're allowed to have your preferences, of course, but so is everyone else. You shouldn't assume that your way of seeing things is the only valid way to see them, or that your interpretation of facts, events, and actions is always correct. A lot of fights in relationships happen because people don't want to take the time to understand each other. Very few people intentionally and consciously do things to upset their partners, unless the relationship has already degraded to the point where lashing out at each other is your main shared interest. If you assume positive intent, the amount of time you spend fighting will drop by half, if not even more. Story 5. That you need to find the one. No, that only exists in Disney movies and other works of fiction. Absolutely, everyone is flawed in some way, and also everyone fucks up sometimes, and also everyone changes over time. By expecting someone to be the one, you unreasonably expect them to be perfectly compatible for you in every single way, for all time, as well as for fate or the stars or whatever to do all the heavy lifting when it comes to making your relationship last. It sets you up for a lot of disappointment and heartbreak. I think it's important to note that there is no such thing as the one. Just different people with different levels of compatibility for you in different areas of life. Your partner is replaceable, and so are you. Someone better is always out there, in this world of 8+ billion people. By acknowledging that your partner isn't the one, and neither are you for them, you acknowledge that your relationship is mortal, fallible, and even somewhat fragile. By maturely acknowledging this difficult truth, you can have a proactive mindset about actively working on keeping your relationship alive, rather than passively expecting it to magically work, as well as trying to resolve differences and disagreements with realistic compromises. Story 6. That long-term commitment automatically means engagement and marriage. My wife and I did that, but my parents married without any engagement ring or whatsoever. They never even called that stadium engaged. My sister and her boyfriend, for lack of a better word, have been together for over 20 years now, with a house and kids, yet no marriage. In a free and modern country, also, What's with the myth that every engagement or marriage should be visible with a ring? If there is no law that says you have to wear one, why do people automatically assume that anyone not wearing a ring is single? Story 7. That you should talk about every little issue you have with each other. Sometimes, you gotta ignore the little things that irritate you. Pick your hills to die on. Sometimes my husband showers a bit less than I'd like because he's depressed. Is it worth making him feel even worse about himself so that it smells a bit better in our house? Hell no. It's worth putting up with little frustrations. Also, that there has to be give and take in your relationship. Sometimes you are doing all of the taking and sometimes you are doing all of the giving. Life is complicated and gets even more complicated as you age. Being grateful for and gracious with each other is part of loving. Story 8. That it has to be hard. You have to put in effort. Yes. Life can be hard, yes. Your relationship itself shouldn't be difficult. If it's family that can't be reasoned with, you need boundaries and some space. If your partner and you are constantly butting heads, you're with the wrong person. Don't waste either of your time. Also, not always the case, but many toxic relationships blame each other when they're both fucked up. So that misconception would be that one person has to be at fault. Sometimes you're just shitty together, and the universe brought you together to highlight the icky parts of each other. Story 9. That if you are getting relationship advice from Reddit, you are in big trouble. So as a 60-year-old, I will just put a nugget or two worth thinking about if your goal is to be in lifelong marriage before you make the jump. If your mate has to be hot, gorgeous, handsome, etc., consider how things will be when both of your looks start to fade, and they will, maybe sooner, maybe later. Not saying ignore looks, but people's emphasis on it seems too much for what is ephemeral. And also people may be missing people who might be a good match for a long-term partner. If one or both of you do a lot of drugs, be it alcohol, weed, or anything else, you should look at this and examine why and what this could mean later on. The "you can always get a divorce" option seems to be something people are too casual about. If your potential partner is divorced, it is worth exploring why that happened, keeping in mind second marriages fail at a rate of about 67%. I am not a psychologist, but it seems to suggest that divorcees have some sort of issues in maintaining such long relationships, whatever that might be. If I were to guess, most divorces are not solely caused by the other partner's faults. It probably is a combination of both partners' issues. Yes, I am well aware that someone in an abusive situation rightly would get a divorce, but since the divorce rate for first marriages is 50%, I have a hard time seeing many of the divorces out there being that cut and dry. On a more positive note, if you get married and can stay married, there is a very good chance your financial situation in life will be a lot better. Buying a house becomes much more manageable. Saving for retirement with 2 incomes is a lot easier than one. As single people realize, if you lose your job, you go from X dollars per month to $0 and is quite stressful. In a 2-income marriage, you would go from X dollars to some lower value of Y dollars a month. Stressful, but a lot of times manageable until things improve. Lifelong marriage is frequently a ticket to a better financial life, and why, if you can make it work, you will be better off. Story 10. That needing time to yourself is a bad thing. Not every waking moment needs to be spent with your other half. Having your own hobbies and interests is a good thing. I've been married almost 13 years now, and my wife and I have a few hobbies we enjoy together and others we do separately. I have other friends who assume because I game she must enjoy gaming, or because she loves pottery, it's something I love. As long as you show an interest in their excitement and enjoyment of said hobby, music, etc., that's more than enough. Story 11. That if you post lots of photos of you and your partner on social media, that you aren't really happy. I've been happily married for 8 years. I find bitter, lonely people often say this because they want to believe that happy couples don't exist, and if they do, they don't have anything to prove. Maybe some people just like sharing photos? Crazy concept. Story 12. Opposites may attract, but they don't make long-lasting partners. You need common ground on certain key aspects. Kids don't save relationships. They just force you to see someone who doesn't want to be with you for the rest of your life. And you may be able to make more lives miserable. It's not always you and your partner against the world. You also marry another family, and believing you have no responsibilities to them is a lie. You don't have to tell your family about all the problems you're facing. This might be controversial, but nothing changes the way your family perceives your partner like telling them what you're fighting for. You might be able to reconcile and be happily ever after, but your parents' siblings may never forgive them. If you're facing severe problems, ask for advice from another couples counseling / or anyone who can be impartial. You have to stay together for the kids. For God's sake, no. The only thing that may traumatize a kid more than a divorce is living in a household where the couple doesn't love and respect each other. For everyone's good, leave. You have to do everything together. Please don't. Each one needs to have hobbies and friends outside the relationship. If you're married, you can't have single friends. Please don't. People are worthy of friends despite their relationship status. If you don't trust your partner's friend, you actually don't trust your partner. And I'm so sorry for you. Story 13. People assume the worst whenever they see age gap relationships. Oh, he's a crappy BF? That's because he's so much older and taking advantage of your youth. Oh, you're in a loving marriage? You only think that because he's manipulating you. I've seen women in their mid-30s told that they are victims for dating older men. Come on, garbage partners happen regardless if you're the same age or younger or older. Focus on the negative or positive behavior and actions of partners. BTW, in case people ask, I actually prefer women older than myself. For some reason, I've never received the grief and insults women get for dating older. Story 14, that you somehow own them. I know most people don't directly think this way, but it's still a really ingrained concept. Anything and everything from getting mad at a partner for looking at porn, to checking out someone attractive, to enjoying some flirting. I'm not advocating for cheating, but coming from a polyamorous perspective, jealousy is a valid emotion, but it doesn't give you the right to be abusive and controlling. Humans have the capacity and often uncontrolled reflex to find multiple different people attractive, care about multiple different people, and have multiple close relationships. Monogamy can still happen while admitting and allowing all of this, and having open conversations about thoughts and feelings makes you a safe partner. Being hostile when it happens makes you an unsafe partner. Story 15. That you have to fight for your relationship because marriages are supposed to be hard. That yelling and fighting is something every couple does, and a certain amount of it is just to be accepted and tolerated. It just isn't true. Marriages aren't supposed to be hard. They're supposed to feel like a breath of fresh air, and when they don't, you course correct until it does again. You work as a team with a common goal of supporting each other and the life you've built. That isn't to say that there are never struggles, but if you are regularly fighting with someone who is supposed to be the love of your life and your number one supporter, something is actually really not okay. Story 16. Most people don't seem to realize that in long-term relationships, you make a choice every day that the person and the relationship and the partnership is worthy of your time, energy, and commitment. In the best scenario, your partner is on the same page and you both continue to choose to put in the energy, time, and love which propels you towards a future together. No one is perfect, but many, many things can be worked out if you both choose individually and together to make changes to support your relationship and partnership. Story 17. That the right ones just work without and stress or strife. All relationships take work and adjustment by both partners in a long-term committed relationship. People change over time, and thus the relationship changes as well. The strength of a relationship is communicating well to set joint goals and accommodate the life goals and preferences of both partners, which often requires compromise. Relationships are wonderful, but they are not easy nor effortless. Story 18. Just because someone has cheated in a past relationship doesn't mean they are a habitual cheater or that it will happen again. Context matters a lot. If it was a long time ago, they're honest about everything wrong they did, and they've changed their own circumstances. They quit drinking and partying and have not indulged for 5 years, for example. You can probably trust that they understand the gravity of their actions and won't go for a repeat. I'm not saying believe a known serial cheater or even someone who cheated on their ex before you, but some people do deserve a chance. Story 19. That there is some universal set of rules that all relationships should follow, like some sort of guidebook that details how a relationship is defined and how the people in it should act. For example, I sometimes see people debate what constitutes cheating, as if this was a question with one right answer. The truth is that everyone has a different definition. Some people consider watching porn to be cheating, and some people don't consider having sex with someone other than your partner to be cheating. Neither of them is wrong, because it comes down to personal preference. Unfortunately, most people assume that their definition of cheating is universal or somehow correct, so they don't discuss it with potential partners, which can lead to problems down the road if it turns out that their partner has a different definition. Also, the idea that love and abuse are mutually exclusive. It's not uncommon at all for people to say something like, If they actually loved you, cared for you, respected you, they wouldn't ignore your boundaries, try to control you, intentionally hurt you, etc. And I admit I'm guilty of having this mindset too. It's hard to believe that someone would treat a person they love badly, but it is absolutely possible, and denying it just makes it harder for people to realize they're being abused. Because when someone in an abusive relationship reads the sentence, "If they love you, they wouldn't abuse you," they probably aren't going to think, "So because they abuse me, it means they don't really love me." Instead, it's more likely they'll come to the conclusion, "But they do love me. So if you can't abuse someone you love, then I guess that proves it isn't abuse and I'm just overreacting." Story 20. That's there's some perfect person out there for you. Even if you manage to find someone you feel that way about, what are the odds that they'd feel the same way about you? What are the odds that they would even live in the same country as you, or speak the same language as you? I feel the key to obtaining a happy lifelong relationship is just to find someone who's worthy of spending the rest of your life with. They probably won't be perfect. They probably won't check every box on the list, but it should be someone who you value in your life and someone who values you. Story 21. That things are always equal. Someone is always going to be working more or doing more of the household chores or a better caregiver to your kids. You have to give up on trying to make things perfectly equal and find someone whose strengths and weaknesses complement your own. I do all the dishes in our house, for instance, and some days it drives me nuts. But then I see my wife tend to our daughter's every emotional distress. And that's the most important thing to me, so I don't mind the dishes quite so much. Story 22. That your partner should be your best friend. Your partner can be one of your best friends, but they should definitely not be your only best friend. Having someone to go to when you need to unload, because your partner didn't load the dishwasher for the 100th time, and you just reminded them nicely when all you really wanted to do was to scream at them, but you ended up just unloading onto your bestie that won't judge you and just knows you need a safe space that won't lead to a breakup is actually kinda of clutch. Sometimes your partner doesn't need to see every impulsive, unfiltered response that runs through your mind, and if you need to get it out, do it with a bestie that won't judge you in an invulnerable moment. Story 23. I am a 66-year-old boomer. A few years ago, my therapist gently brought up the term codependency in one of our sessions. I had always imagined the stereotype of this syndrome, at least in my own mind, as being lonely, old, unfulfilled moms, allowing their grown sons to live at home and abuse and use them, as codependency. Turns out it's a bit more than that. I understand codependency now as being the hope that if one is just good enough, in whatever way it applies, that it will eventually enlighten an unkind, unresponsive, controlling partner to suddenly wake up, realize how wonderful and invaluable that one is, and then and therefore, change. Turns out it's kind of the very opposite. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.